geopolitics. So here I see it's the reverse. We see a lot on geopolitics, but we don't cover science. So I just want to take a few minutes and use a few images to convey something about where this is all taking place. When we talk about Pakistan and CPEC, words are one thing, but as we've heard from some of the speakers, what this means on the ground is something else. And this is a satellite image of the area. We see the Chinese border, and we see where the Sterberg highway is going. So what I want to convey in these images I'll show is the landscape and the physical environment that CPEC is taking place in. So it's not taking place in Britain on a flat plain or like Eastern China. So we have a much different perspective that we need to take on board when we think about CPEC. I'll start with a different map than we've seen. Climatic regions, rainfall. Over here we see how we have deserts to the high mountain regions. So the environment you put a road through does matter, because if we think about the deserts and water down this, where does the water come for the development, for the infrastructure, for the people, for the communities? If we don't take care of some of the basic issues, how are we going to have all these great benefits and gains we talk about? Also, rainfall goes with this too. If you're familiar with the area, you already know this, but it's just a different way of looking at this one set environment. We can start at the top at the Kundra Pass, 4,700 meters, probably the highest point between two nations in the world, certainly the highest road they like to claim. So think of how you get your goods from zero down in Gwadar up to 4,700 meters and what that means. On the internet, I found some pictures, but just if you look at this, how are you going to add your pipelines, your railways, or expand your ability to transit goods? So it's very much a physical limitations that take place here, and that's if we don't concern ourselves with the political or economic ramifications. Maybe my favorite picture is this beautiful road, great engineering, but not able to handle much traffic. This one we're actually underneath part of the mountain. So I'll show you another picture soon that shows how we try to look at it from another dimension. 2010, we see a Chinese truck being stuck on the road, landslides, very dramatic. Somebody is able to capture this. So how are we going to put 46 billion, 62 billion, I've even been told 100 billion through this region here? It's a vulnerable environment. Naturally, that's before we add mankind's footprint on it, and before we talk about climate change or other possible events. Also think about it as vulnerable to politics, to military action, a very narrow area, very easy to be impacted by. We've heard about separatists. What about other states, Russia, U.S., India, etc., that it wouldn't take very much to disrupt this great CPEC routing. If we go down to the bottom to Baluchistan, we see a Chinese flag pointing us to Gwadar City over here. Remember, it's a desert area. We're going to be taking it through places like this. Also, a picture from Quetta, flooding. So it's not a simple environment. It's not a European environment that without things that will stress what we see and what we have to deal with. This is some also remote sensing of Gwadar. We can see here in 1987 to 2017, we see these areas that are increasing in size, being filled in. So 1987 to this time, 30 years. Who's done this? Probably a lot of it's Pakistani, etc. How do we separate out the Chinese impact, or also what will the Chinese impact be in the future? So we see this big area, maybe not in the back, but big red area. It shows us this land change. So part of what was going to happen in CPEC will be actually changing the physical environment that Pakistan will use, that China will use in the area. This is probably my favorite map because it shows this beautiful rail line from Gwadar through Pakistan up to Kashgar, or actually in China. And recently I presented this to a Chinese scholar, and they very much stressed, well, look how short it is on the map. It's a very short line, much shorter than going around through Singapore and the Straits of Malacca. But when you try and explain how do you get the goods, the oil, water, whatever, uphill, they don't have a great appreciation for gravity. They just see a line on a map. And as it goes down, they don't think about how it goes up. So before it gets to China and has the benefit, we have to conquer the environment. And China very much has that perspective from Mao, man over nature. Sometimes, though, nature wins, as we often see. So here we are back to the area, a little different image. So it's just in these dark areas, the valleys, that any route will have to run. And then we want to zoom in on Gilgit. So this is from Google Earth. You can kind of get these profiles of the elevation. You can see these little areas here in this vast landscape. But if we go into remote sensing from above, maybe this line you won't quite see it, but it does stress how hard it is to see these areas. And if we zoom in, just amongst all these rocks, you just see these little areas of greenery. So think if you're coming through here, where's your train line going? Where's your pipeline going to go? And how are you going to provide the energy to make the oil flow, et cetera? So when China says it has a shortcut to the Indian Ocean and into the oil sources of the Middle East, just think, how are you physically going to do it? And then we can zoom in. And already this area looks quite full to me. I have not been to Gilgit, but it looks like full. We have the airport there. We go to the mountainside here. Here's a road there. How are we going to really expand it? Where's the room for this? Where's the ability to conquer nature? And how much time, how much will it cost to actually build roads like I showed at the beginning that have to destroy or take down the mountains to reroute the physical environment so your CPEC and your goods can flow through. So I'm just going to end with this. This is also from a satellite. If you try and find the border, or you try and find the Karakoram Highway with satellites, you can't even find it. So it goes back to some of the pictures that I showed, that it's so narrow and so restricted that even our satellites don't have the scope, the perspective to see. You need to be right on top to look right down, but you might only have a 100-meter or a few hundred meters gap where these canyons and these roadways are going. So if we can't even map them with all the technology we have today, just think, how are we going to build in these areas tomorrow? Thank you.